let me first and foremost get to bring you up to speed with what is going on as far as the decision of government is concerned, based on the campaign promise that was made in 2023. We, of course, know that during that campaign, the president had come out to say then a candidate, Bola Tinubu, I remember, I think it was in Wari in Imo State precisely, where he says to curb corruption, people do not have to go and carry huge amount of money, pay 100% for a house, millions of naira, and also go and pay 100% on a car. I mean, where in other climes, you can all parade the payment or spread the payment across the years, pay a little and pay across the years. But in Nigeria, that facility or that opportunity does not exist. Except you go to the bank and you'll be paying in double digits of interest rate. Because the government has said they will now turn that curve and ensure that citizens have access to goods and services, and they will be able to spread the payment. And so the government created what they call the National Credit the Nigerian Consumer Credit Corporation, Credit Corp, is a significant move to boost social mobility among Nigerians, initially exclusive to civil servants. And this scheme aims to make consumer credit accessible and empower economically active citizens. And of course, the president had appointed a 36-year-old Uzoma Nwagba as the managing director and chief executive officer of the Nigerian Consumer Credit Corporation. The appointee holds a master's of business administration from the Harvard Business School and a first-class bachelor's of engineering from Howard University in Washington, D.C. Before his appointment, Engineer Nwagba served as a chief operating officer of the Bank of Industry in charge of driving microcredit and other financial interventions at the institution. So Nwagba is live here in our studio. He has the credit card, and he will be giving us insight into what it means, whether or not this government is fulfilling the campaign promise of candidate Bola Tinubu, and what this would benefit the average citizen. Thank you so much, Mr. Nwagba, for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Sheon. It's good to be here.
Yeah, let me ask you straight up. Is this a fulfillment of President Bola Tinubu's campaign promise? That, look, no longer will any Nigerian citizen will have to take 150 million naira, 70 million naira, 50 million naira just because they want to own a home or own a house, or go take 30 million, 12 million naira, 15 million naira because they want to buy a brand new car. Is that the idea?
Yes, that's the idea. We have a mandate to make consumer credit more accessible to millions of Nigerians and to fix whatever are the barriers to achieving that. So we know that consumer credit is all about access to capital for people to be able to, yes, like you said, pay for things over time. And it's essentially like I say all the time, that you shouldn't be buying a house when you are 60. If you can buy one when you are 35 and pay with the same income that you would earn over that period, so you can have a home for 35 years or for 25 years. And so the idea is that we will be able to remove those barriers that stop people from accessing consumer credit from their financial institutions and allow them to have a higher quality of life. Like you mentioned earlier as well, the second reason why President Tinubu has been adamant about making this happen is because of corruption, and he's quite vocal about that we are economically active Nigerians who are working on incentives. That means that people have an incentive to be corrupt, to amass a lot of money or to hold a lot of money when they do not know or cannot access these basic goods and services without paying in full and paying cash and carry. So you have the civil service where people have to have 30 million naira, 40 million naira, like you said, to buy a house. So our job is to remove those barriers and make it easier for Nigerians to have access to a higher quality of life and pay over the life of their working life.
Okay, so let me ask you, because I know you schooled in the US.
Yes.
And this there is a popularity of this kind of facility. In fact, if you go into some outlets in the United States and you carry a huge amount of money and you say you want to buy something in cash or pay upfront, they'll look at you like a madman, because credit and credit and credit is the market or the system of America.
Right.
They want you to pay on. They don't like you to pay upfront. I mean, it's good for you to pay upfront.
Right.
What it then means is that even your iPhone, an average American citizen don't have to pay $1,500, $1,000 to buy a phone. It's something that they can pay over. And when they will have to change? Is that the closest model that President Tinubu wants to adopt?
I think that's a model that can be used to explain this. But even models like China have done it much faster, you know. And the idea is, yes, like you said, yeah, I lived a good part of I had my education in the US. That's my university education. But what I haven't told you yet is that I had a credit card as a student that was just about $1,000, and I had just moved from Nigeria, King's College, to start my schooling there. And over 4 years, I was paying that $1,000 credit card as I was using it every time. And by the time I was done with school, and I then now I just about to start my job after school, I walked into a Toyota dealership and they gave me a $40,000 car. That's a Toyota car.
As a fresh graduate.
As a fresh graduate, because of the credit history that I had built on a $1,000 credit card.
So you built
over 4 years.
How much of credit have you built over that 4 years?
I was just, the max was at $1,000, so I could not be indebted more than $1,000 at the time. But you use and you pay every single month, but I could not be indebted more than $1,000. But because I was judicious about paying back that credit every single month, whether I use it to buy food or clothing or books or whatever, I was always paying it back. So it didn't matter that my earnings were basically zero as a student, or that the things I were buying were low ticket items. The idea that I had good credit and good credit habits meant that I was able to walk into a dealership and they said, we look at just run your credit. It takes 2 minutes to run your credit, check on your credit score, and then make a decision to give me that car. Of course, I had a job, but that was less about the job. It was more about my history. So President Tinubu is quite to the point of almost obsession about this problem, that we should let Nigerians be able to have the same experience of being able to build a credit history and access goods and services that improve their life. Because
so some of the things that are applicable in some of the claims that you're talking about is that they have citizens have social identity.
Yes.
In the United States, it's called the Social Security numbers.
Yes.
Where is a unique identity for you, and when it's run, it simply brings your profile, or your credit profile, your banking profile out. It tells what you have, what you own, what you are owing, and all what have you. How credible is our database in terms of an average citizen social security status?
Right. So this is a good time to talk about what our job is actually, how we conduct our business at Credit Corp. So if that infrastructure were credible, what you're just describing, if we were credible in Nigeria, we would not need us. So our first job is actually to strengthen the credit infrastructure of the country, meaning that all credit, that is anybody who borrows money from wherever they're borrowing money, it is written to the credit bureaus, the credit registries, and accessible, all consumer credit.
There is an established credit bureau in Nigeria.
There are credit bureaus in Nigeria.
But work with the banks and all of them.
Yes, but very, very little consumer credit on it. So that means if you're trying to borrow money from any of the banks or from microfinance or fintechs, they can try to check your credit records, but they wouldn't find you. It's quite common, they won't find you. And even a lot of consumer lending happens outside of the deposit money banks that are mandated to write to the credit bureaus. So our first job is even to fix and strengthen that infrastructure so that the financial system can have trust in the credit system, the credit registry, and the credit infrastructure with the data to be able to lend. Today, the CBN does about, or not the CBN, CBN reports about 35 trillion naira worth of consumer credit happening every year. That sounds like a lot of money, but it's not. There's consumer lending happening. People are getting mortgages, buying cars, things on credit. This 35 trillion naira for a country this size. For it to feel half the way it feels in the US, like you described, or even the UK or some of these other climes, we need to be doing about 180 trillion naira per annum for about half the population to start having some decent access to consumer credit. Now, of course, the government cannot fund that. So the financial system, the banks, the microfinance, the people who already do lending today are the ones who have the capital. They have the money. They're just afraid because they cannot put their money out there and lose money. So there's capital preservation, of course, is the most important principle of finance before you now get into being profitable. So our job is to remove that barrier that stops them from lending because they don't have a system they can trust. So that every Nigerian can now have a credit score that is credible, that is a reflection of their credit life, their credit history, their their borrowing patterns, and how they have behaved.
All right. So, I mean, a lot of Nigerians might sound like jargons because these are not terminologies that we're familiar with. Right. I mean, credit and credit It's not something an average Nigerian is familiar with.
Yes.
So to get clarity on this, the fact is that credit core and your focus is on consumer credit.
Yes.
That means if I want to buy television,
yes.
if I want to own a house,
yes.
do mortgage.
Yes.
If I want to buy a car,
yes.
If I want to buy basic consumer,
a cell phone, a laptop,
cell phone,
just livelihood, better quality of life items. You want to buy a solar panel so they can have electricity, things like that.
That's what you're servicing.
Yes.
Outside of that,
education as well. Of course, there's a student loan component of the government, but student loans are also part of consumer credit. Just things that enhance your quality of life.
So I know you are in federal government-owned bank.
Yes, a development financial institution.
Absolutely. I mean, let's call it a bank. For the ease of understanding. You're a federal government-owned bank.
Yes.
What is the difference between the credit core as a financial institution compared to other commercial banks?
Oh, that's a very important question. First is that we do not lend directly to Nigerians. We enable the banks, the microfinance banks, the fintechs, even cooperatives, wherever lending and capital happens today, we enable them to do more. That's one. So first, one of our jobs is, besides strengthening the infrastructure, which I've described in a fair amount of detail, so that every Nigerian has a credit score, the financial institutions can check and see how they behave and rely on that to lend money. That's number one job. So that 180 trillion naira can now come flooding. But beyond that, while we are getting there, because it's going to take a long time, the next, even in the immediate, we are doing wholesale lending. This is back to your question, meaning that we have capital and we will give them to the financial institutions, the banks, microfinance, etc. And we say, if you need more capital to be able to lend more to Nigerians, we will lend to you and you can do that. So that's wholesale lending. The second part of our credit work is around guarantees. And this is important when you talk about made in Nigeria goods. So one of the third piece, besides quality of life and stemming corruption, the third reason why we're here is to catalyze industry, local industry. That means that we want to be able to make money available for Nigerians to buy things that are made in Nigeria, so that manufacturers can have a proven demand for their goods and services. So
that is, if they agree, if I'm manufacturing this device, for example, and I agree to get a prorated payment, because a lot of the Nigerian manufacturers or even the outfits are not used to having a prorated payment.
No, Sharon, it doesn't. They get full payments.
Oh, they get full payment.
Yes, when you go to the Toyota dealership, where you go, or they get a mortgage or whatever, the real estate developer or the Toyota, in this case, dealership, they get paid in full. That's why the financial institutions are there. It's the banks, the microfinance that run the credit. So if a manufacturer who makes, let's say, I don't know, furniture, and as long as they're making this in Nigeria, this is the third part about credit guarantees. So besides giving wholesale lending that I mentioned, we also give credit guarantees, meaning if a financial institution has its own money, wants to lend its money, but wants the risk to be shared, meaning that if they lose money or there's no repayment, that they want someone to share the risk, we can get into sharing that risk if they are lending money for local manufacturing. That's what I mean by local manufacturing.
So this initiative, which is just started, you are just fresh in your office. This has never happened in Nigeria before.
Yes.
This is novel as far as the Nigerian financial system is concerned. But one of the issues that a lot of people will have in going to collect loan, I mean, loans are growing up, collecting loan sounds like a voodoo, sounds like a bad way to live your life. We're not
100%.
used to collecting loans. Nigerians need to start learning or understanding that when you have to own some of these things that are basic good things of life, and you don't have to eke out all of your life savings or life earnings to buy these. We need to now start learning all of these. But the question is that the interest rate. The bank, you know what the interest rate are? They're in double digits.
Yes.
You know.
So first of all, is that
is credit cards going to be in double digits too?
First, we are lending to the financial institutions. So we are definitely going to make it more competitive rates to the financial institutions, and then they would lend to Nigerians. So our goal is that they will obviously pass on those savings to the Nigerians. On what you talked about, the cultural reorientation, meaning just people having a different view on what credit is. I think you took the words out of my mouth, because that's our third job. So I talked about infrastructure first, then I talked about providing capital through credit guarantees and wholesale lending. And then the third work is actually education of the public around credit. Credit is a tool to turbocharge your life, not a bad lot, something that's happened as a result of misfortune. So that you borrow money to accelerate your life. It's like
and Nigerians need to understand that you don't have to use your hard-earned money to do anything. All your money, just carry. You have a 50 million, 30 million naira savings, and you want to own one property or one thing, and you carry all of those money and you throw it at that item.
You shouldn't do that.
We should start having that culture, because that's the life.
Yes.
People save all their monies, and at the end of the day, they buy only one item. They buy a house and they go broke.
That's the so in the since you talked about the US, I'll use that as an example. If you think of course, GDP is not literally the sum of everybody's income, but roughly you could think about it as that. You know, if you took everybody's earnings in the country and add it up, it's roughly a simplified way of talking about GDP. In the US, everybody's income in the country is a certain amount. The amount of consumer credit that is now done on top of that income is twice that amount. So what that means that if you people who earn $100,000 in the US are living a lifestyle that is $300,000, and they will live that $300,000 lifestyle for the rest of their life. So you just have had a much better quality of life.
So you're kick-starting with civil servants?
Yes.
For how long?
First, it's going to be, we have a 6-month duration, but it's not going to be that we are not going to access the rest of the public while we start with the civil servants. So it's more like you start and then you add the next demography to it. Okay. The reason why we're looking at civil servants is, one, obviously they are a critical part of the infrastructure of government. They are also a good test bed for this thing we talked about, curbing corruption. But most importantly is that their income is on a regimented, predictable basis. So it's a good way for us to kickstart and work with the structures that already exist. There are financial institutions that already lend to civil servants or can lend to the civil servants, and their income can be measured and tracked.
All right. Let's break it down and try to bring home our conversation now. Let's assume I am citizen Sheung, and I want to own a Toyota Camry 2015 model. Let's assume that it goes for about 10 million naira. Where do I start from to own that car based on the standards of the credit card?
Understood. That's an important question. First, I'll start with how much do you earn. So
it's basically bottom line. I need to have an earning.
You have to have an income is the start credit. You have to have an earning. It doesn't have to be a salary every month. It doesn't have to be.
But what of the case of the instability with jobs, unemployment rate? I mean, people get laid off a few weeks ago. An airline just laid off most part of their staff. So if someone is dependent on this kind of facilities, in trouble, isn't it?
No, well, because unemployment is a hydra-headed problem. There are many sides to the problem of unemployment. We don't want to lose our focus. So adding unemployment to our job is scope creep as far as.
So you focus.
We focus on people
servicing
Nigerians who have an active income. You could be a vulcanizer. You could be someone who is sort of doing a business on the side or an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter.
But you have a proof.
You have to have an active.
Of a standard daily. The standard consistent earning.
Yes, consistent again doesn't mean regimented. It doesn't have to be every day or every month. But the financial system, there are several tools and some that would also be supporting the financial institutions to be able to measure people's income in a way that is not necessarily forcing them to be salaried employees. So if you're a vulcanizer and you earn 20,000 5,000 today, 3,000 tomorrow, maybe 0 the next day, 4,000 the next day. But then there are very many predictive models that can figure out what is a reasonable estimate of your financial capacity. And then on the basis of that, you can go to your financial institution and they grant you credit. So back to your question, if I want to get a 10 million naira car, then what you do first is that you have to have a predictable income. Secondly is that you may not be able to service a 10 million naira car now, but you can borrow for, let's say you have an active loan, maybe a solar panel for your house. And based on what we are doing with the credit infrastructure, your credit behavior when you go borrow from your microfinance bank to get that solar panel would now be written to the credit system. And if you are consistent, just like I was as a 20-year-old student, consistent with repaying your credit, you have a credit score that is high. And at some point you can go and, higher and say, okay, now I want to borrow to get a car. And obviously your income would also be following that. So it's a journey. And it's not something that you can just do overnight And
but the first attempt at all of these in easing the life of Nigerians is that the access to it.
Yes.
Consumer credit.
Yes.
Let them, first of all, have access.
Access.
Then we balance up.
Yes. So our mandate, in fact, if you look, we are quite public to say that our job is to get access to consumer credit to half of the commercially active population by 2030.
Quickly, can you tell us, Uzoma, what is the response of Nigerians towards this in the last few months?
Oh, it's been overwhelming. It's been overwhelming. We didn't expect the volume of applications or expressions of interest when we put out an EOI just a week or so after I got appointed. We put out an EOI, and we had about 1.5 million, as of today, close to 1.6 million Nigerians who've indicated interest.
Applications.
Yes, told us what they do, submitted their income information, talked about what they need credit for, and essentially expect that. Right? So we didn't even expect that volume. So I think people have been listening to the utterances of the president and are quite expectant of this. And it is our job, and we are prepared to take a systematic approach to make sure that we continue to go through the demographies of Nigeria.
Audacity is what I see here.
Yes, sir.
You're a 36-year-old, and you have the burden of a noble idea in opening up a channel that will give Nigerians ease of it. Well, if this government is on this lane, it does look like walking the talk. But beyond that is the sustainability and whether or not this, in the end, works for the interest of Nigerians. But I wish you, Uzoma, you and your colleagues at Credit Corp all the very best. Thank you so much indeed.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.